a minute after he opens it. Okay.
Okay.
There's Archie. That's little Archie.
Hi.
Yep, that's little
cute.
Archie.
Oh,
We'll have to feature. Wait, we should have him. He's perfect for this. He'll be attentive to the books. For sure.
He is obsessed with books.
Oh,
is he?
Oh, yeah.
that's cute. How
All right,
old
we have
is
some
he?
people coming in. He is 19 months, 20 months,
so cute.
somewhere in there.
Oh, sweet. Oh, I see. Okay.
All right, we have a few people coming in. So
Okay,
I think
great.
if you want to give it another minute or so, and then should be good to go.
Okay. Oh.
Oh gosh, I'll be right back. Someone's pounding on the door.
Oh, that's okay. That is okay. I'll just wait another few seconds and then if she's not back, we'll get started. Okay, I think maybe we'll just get started. Keely, I think we will. She's in that building, so she had to tend to who was knocking on the door. Well, allow me to get started. My name is Teresa Kalchek, and I am the Director of Literacy for EDGE, powered by Wheeling Country Day School. She's back. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, sorry about that.
No, it's okay. It's okay. We know that, on a Zoom, you just never know, right? But yeah, so I am the, like I just said, the Director of Literacy for EDGE. And Sarah and I are excited to come back again to feature a special guest. But I'm going to allow Sarah to introduce herself first before we begin.
Sure. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Sora. I'm the director of the Dyslexia Center and Learning Lab at Carlow University on Carlow's campus. And Teresa and I are so excited to have you all here tonight for our Partnership with Parent series. This is a really exciting one and important topics that we're discussing tonight. So we're so excited that you're joining us.
Right. So remember, we record these and we put them on our websites. So you can share with friends that could not make it tonight. So we always have these available for you. But I'll just take this moment right now to introduce our presenter. We'll be exploring books for young children and adolescents with learning differences, specifically highlighting dyslexia and ADHD. Several books and authors will be presented, and you will all have an opportunity to explore some titles, and maybe we could share with one another. Feel free to talk, interject at any time, put some questions in the chat box, and then Sarah will be watching that chat box. So we want to welcome our presenter, Dr. Keely Baronak. She is currently the professor of education and chair of the education department at Carlow University, where she also serves as executive director of the campus laboratory school. For many years, Keely has been a passionate educator and advocate for children with learning differences. She strongly believes in highly knowledgeable and skilled teachers and appropriate instruction for all learners. To ensure the quality of teacher education at Carlow University, Keely led her team to achieve accreditation through the International Dyslexia Association. This national well-known accreditation ensures that specialists and teachers are appropriately trained to use a structured approach to teaching reading. So with that, it is an honor for Sarah and I to introduce our friend, colleague, and my mentor, Keely Baronak. Keely, welcome.
Thank you so
We're
much.
so excited to
We're
have you.
so excited.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for asking me.
Yeah, great.
I will go ahead and share my screen and we'll just jump right in. So I prepared a presentation particularly geared for parents, caregivers, and grandparents, but it's certainly applicable to teachers, community members, those who are just interested, and anyone even working in out of school or non-formal learning spaces. Hopefully everyone finds something valuable or a new book that they didn't know about before to add to their library or sort of enhance their repertoire. As Teresa mentioned, I'm really excited to be part of the Carlow University community, leading the teacher education program, teaching courses undergraduate and graduate, and being able to build a strong reading specialist program with our colleague Val Pacini, and watching the growth of the students and our own staff and our prospective teachers. It's just been an incredible honor. So tonight's topic really gets to the heart of equity. We ground a lot of the work that we do in Zaretta Hammond's culturally responsive teaching and the research that went before her of Gay and others. But this is about, while representation in books, you know, finding people who are reminiscent of you, right? Who look at like you and honor your own lived experiences. That's just one component of what we consider culturally responsive teaching, but it is a very important one. And so we'll sort of begin this with a grounding in, I consider culturally responsive teaching practices to include students who have dyslexia, who have any type of language-based disability, ADHD, executive functioning disorders, in addition to culture and race and religion and gender. There's a fabulous website called We Need Diverse Books. It's a nonprofit, completely grassroots, and it's all about elevating the voices of authors who themselves represent a diverse background and experiences. And so this is a website, open sourced, easy to get to and check out if you're interested. One of the books on that We Need Diverse Books, that's what the WNDB stands for in the left-hand corner, is Abigail Hin-Wen's book. The character, while it's not about his experience with dyslexia, Xavier, who's one of the lead characters in several of her novels. This happens to be the Love Boat Reunion, so she had a one prior book that sort of built upon it, but he does have dyslexia, and so that comes through the text, but it doesn't define him as a person. So it's all about his experiences. He and Sophie's college professor thinks her first project is, quote, too feminine. And Xavier's father is giving him an ultimatum because he's struggling in school. So a typical teen angst book, if you will, very much popular with the adolescent population, but again, a character who represents multiple intersecting identities, including dyslexia. At the heart of this is the research around windows and mirrors. Emily Stowe with the National Seed Project was the one who coined that turn of phrase, windows and mirrors. And that is, she said, all students deserve a curriculum which mirrors their own experiences. So a mirror then is reflective of your own lived experience. But the curriculum must also insist upon the fresh air of windows. So it's an opportunity as a window for us to peek in or view the experiences of others, which is also equally powerful. And so I think that's the important component. While the books we're talking about, and many of the individuals who might be drawn to watch this webinar later, because you have children or know of children or work with children who have dyslexia, these books are also incredibly important and appropriate to use with all children, right? Neurotypical, any classroom in general education, because again, it provides those students a window into the lived experiences of our children and teenagers who have dyslexia. I love this quote from her. It's something I always try to keep in mind, regardless of the class or the age or grade level of the students I teach. Half of the curriculum walks in the room with the students in the textbooks of their own lives. So it's just a reminder to me that we're teaching children and people and not just the content that's in front of us. All right, so let's jump right in then. What are some great books written about children with dyslexia? Oftentimes it's their own experiences, but in a very powerful or empowering and uplifting ways. Both of these books really celebrate children having a growth mindset. And so you can even see that Carol Dweck, who is sort of the guru, she coined growth mindset, wrote a whole book about it, actually wrote an endorsement for, if you're so smart, how come you can't spell Mississippi? But the growth mindset really is the difference. It's the difference between believing that it just hasn't happened yet, and that the power of what will be or could be, versus a fixed mindset of I'm just not good at it and nothing will ever change or be any better. So these two books do a beautiful job, I think, of not only talking about children who struggle with learning and attention, but understanding that the road they're on, right, may be a little different or longer than other students around them, but it's the power of not yet. And then celebrating the gifts that they do have. Magnificent Meg. I love, it's just a cute book. It's definitely for younger children, as is If You're So Smart. But both are sort of told in the voice. You can actually hear that what would be a second grader or first grader, as if they were telling the story. Finding My Superpower takes it even a step further, this idea of empowerment. So this is great for parents to use with children who are recently diagnosed or who are going through the diagnostic process perhaps and have a lot of fear and trepidation about what it might mean to have a label. And so Finding My Superpower, again, for young children, particularly that, between K and 2, where we really start to see a lot of the struggles with reading come out and where a lot of the referrals come in. But rather than teach them to see the world as it is, what if we inspire them to not see it as something that's wrong with them, right? It's a part of who they are. And there's certainly ways we can support teaching them, but it allows them to sort of unpack those emotions and start to understand that for dyslexic children, it comes with gifts and areas of challenge in a traditional school setting when they're faced with spelling, reading, and writing tasks. A beautiful book, and I love the cover.
Keely, I'll just jump in really quick I just had a thought that I was just talking to a group of students, and I said, I hesitate to say this to parents when there is that initial diagnosis, but it is a gift. And having worked with kids with dyslexia for such a long time, they truly amaze me in ways that some neurotypical students don't. And the way they think about things and their insight into even their comprehension, their insight into what they see and hear and feel about a story blows me away, because I don't, it's something I wouldn't have thought of because my mind doesn't think that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're right. It is a gift. And I love that. I'm going to get that book. That's a wonderful book to have for parents.
it can be very empowering and affirming. And obviously the longer it takes sometimes for a diagnosis, the more trauma there is to unpack from all of the years of struggling and feeling like something is so inherently wrong. You know, there's a lot of shame built up with that. So that book's so powerful for the younger child who hasn't necessarily experienced that level, right, that we often see.
Right.
I think it's more difficult, right? I'm working with adolescents or adults who are just recently diagnosed, don't want to hear about how it's a gift, but then over time we'll start to say, well, these are the things that I do really well and appreciate the fact that not everybody can do those, that they too have those unique gifts. And you'll love this one then too, Sarah, because it plays right off of that. So it's, again, we imagine intelligence, right? And those who do well at school, or the game of school, as it often turns out to be, with very narrowly defined bands of what it means to be smart. And this sort of flips it on its head. And extraordinary talent comes in all shapes and sizes. And the first one is storytellers. And that will come through in a book in a little bit that I'll show you. Because the little girl is brilliant B. She's brilliant at storytelling because they can listen and auditorily comprehend. Typically children with dyslexia can listen and auditorily comprehend so beautifully and then retell the story and understand, as Sarah said, some of the nuances of it and the emotional context, right? And the character development. And so to be allowed to use assistive technology while we're using a structured literacy program to give them access. These children are also, I mean, there's entertainers, right? There's makers, movers, imaginers, people, and questioners. And so it allows all of us, right, to start to realize that where our gifts are. You know, we all don't have the same gifts, but that we complement one another when we work together. Such a fun book. And the colors. There are a lot of these authors, because this is such a personal topic for them, that they write these stories for the next generation of children. To somehow help buffer some of the pain that they went through. So Dr. Dyslexia Dude, written by a doctor, Sean Anthony Robinson, that's sort of a self-portrait of him, if you will, on the front cover. And he and his wife, they're parents now, and their goal, and that's a quote, their goal is to empower students in special education to stay encouraged and know they can still achieve greatness, right? That any type of label or an academic struggle is not the end, and it will not be the defining feature. Again, a powerful model, right, for representation of a window and a mirror for children. Knees, Vanita Oschlager. In rhyming couplets, a fourth grader explains that words come out backwards and I don't know why. So again, a first person account from a child's perspective of the confusion, but the teacher who steps in, right, and makes it an easier road to walk. Aaron Slater, illustrator. This is a newer book. It's from the New York Times best-selling creators. They've written several up there in the right-hand corner. If you've read Add a Twist, Rosie Revere, you know, they take individuals and really highlight their gifts and strengths. Aaron Slater is the character right in the main frame. The unique thing about this book, and I brought it because I thought I would read an excerpt just of this book, not of all of the ones I will share with you. Yeah. But there's an author's note in the back. Aaron Douglas Slater is named after Aaron Douglas, an African-American painter, muralist, and graphic artist who lived from 1899 to 1979, key figure in the Harlem Renaissance. And so the book is really representative of that time period and some of the arts. Interesting. So Aaron, learning to read is hard for Aaron Slater. This is right from the author's notes. His brain has difficulty identifying how speech sounds relate to letters and words. Aaron has dyslexia. For instance, there's also dysgraphia, and they talk about it. Aaron's dyslexia informs who he is, but it does not define who he is. We each have our own superpowers and struggles. That's what makes us unique, beautiful, and strong. And then the illustrator wrote a note under the author's note. As someone who struggled with reading and spelling myself, and I still do, I quickly learned how to read and tell stories instead with pictures. A picture can play with our imagination, make us feel the heat of the glowing sun on a cold winter's day, or feel the wind billowing through the leaves when all is quiet and still. This is a beautifully written book, and dyslexia is understood so intimately by both the author and illustrator. This is an example from the text. This is the very beginning of the book. At the end of the garden, in the soft fading light, when the day turns to dusk and the dusk into night, the sweet scent of jasmine floats into the air to mix with the music of laughter. And there, Aaron D. Slater soaks it all in with his flowery blanket tucked under his chin. Words drift like music, melodious, mild, a sweet summer song for a sweet summer child who drifts off to sleep as the cottonwood sway at the end of the garden at the end of the day.
That's awesome.
So what I love about it is at the end of summer, he of course goes to school, and school becomes a very difficult place for him all through his first grade year. So when he's ready to start second grade, the teacher of course asks him to write a story. The great part is, I think I laughed out loud at this book, because when he starts second grade, his teacher, and they talk about how she's completely overwhelmed. And so he's able to hide and sort of fade into the background, and he stops wearing a lot of his beautiful, artistic, colorful clothing that he's known for. At first it goes well. My teacher is new and a bit overwhelmed by the hullabaloo. But things settle down and Miss Greer finds her stride, and once she gets rolling, there's no place to hide. Class, she says, here's an assignment for you. Write me a story and write something true. And so he goes home, right, and does what Aaron does and starts to write this beautiful, beautiful story, at least in his own mind, but struggles to get the words on paper. And then when he has to speak the story in class, he stares at his shoes and his sunflower socks, and he closes his eyes, and the young Aaron talks. Once there was a flower, and he's trying to read it off of his own paper. No, wait, I know. And he stops holding his paper and says, once there was a magical flower, which gave all who held it extraordinary power. And he stopped reading, and he just started storytelling. And he holds his whole class and his teacher in rapt attention. And it's so beautifully written. And then it ends with his teacher in tears and his whole class clapping for him, realizing the gift of his own storytelling abilities and his artistic talents. And so then it talks about going through second grade and learning to read and some of the struggles that did come with it, but the school celebrating him as a storyteller and artist. And so he felt like his own gifts were supported, and everyone in the class then saw him in a different light. Yeah, highly recommend.
That's
Aaron Slater, illustrator, just to put the book back on the screen.
And that's even a book, Keely, when a classroom teacher recognizes, that, knows that she or he have, a student that has dyslexia, but what a great book to share with the entire class, because how kids can be, they start to notice when a classmate learns differently, doesn't do well, on a spelling test or whatever. But because I've done that before, have read different books where it's like how we talk about our brains are all wired differently. And, where our talents, some might be strong in reading, some might be strong in artwork, but these books, this one particularly, this would be a great book for an entire class of, a mixture of kids and how they learn.
I
love that.
And I think you could circle back to this and say, which one of these are in? Where do you fit, right?
Yeah.
Because this goes beyond just even who's good at math, right? Who is the entertainer, the things that we do with the skill sets that we have.
Yes, exactly. I love that.
Power of literature, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Just a little note, right? As we're sharing all these books and as you're thinking about reading them and engaging them either with your own children, grandchildren, after school group, or your students, just ways to provide some prompts, right, for that type of dialogue and conversation that will bound to happen next, right? What do I know about what I just read? What's an emotion that I feel about? What's something similar that I've experienced or I read? We kind of call this in the world of education, like text to text and text to self. And, you know, it has this technical term to it, but it's really just about linking what we're reading to our own experiences, and then having children share that, like Teresa just said. This is the jumping off point for them to say, well, this is what I struggled with, right? It might not be the same as you, but this is what I love to do.
Yeah.
What's an opinion? What if some element of the text were changed? What would you change? How could it look a little differently? What if I was in the drama? Which part would I play? Where would I be? Would I be a teacher, a student? What question do I have? And then what specific appreciation? You know, how can I talk about this particular text or situation? They call it just the 7 prompts. And it's just a great, I mean, this is used all the way through MFA programs as well, when we're interrogating a piece of literature or a book.
Great questions for parents.
Yeah, yeah.
Reading it at home, great prompts for parents.
I think too, one of the things that I love about these prompts is that it can spark someone else in that classroom that isn't necessarily dyslexic, but can see themselves, you know, sees themselves as different and can then fit themselves into the narrative of that story in a different way. I really love those.
Yeah.
So good. And then this is just another phrase that we wanted to share with some parents and anyone else who is interested. Again, it's a very common phrase in MFA programs, and it's more common in upper elementary, middle school, and high school. But it's this idea of mentor text. So not only can we just read a story to a student, but we can use it to really study it and interrogate the style that it's written in, whether it's a newspaper, a comic strip, an essay, right? Is it first person? Is it third person? Is it dialogue based? Is it rhythmic? So these are texts that you can study and then attempt to imitate, but it can then be used as prompts, writing prompts for students to take off with and write and express themselves. And again, this came from Lynn Dorfman, co-director of the Pennsylvania Writing Project, which is the Pennsylvania chapter of the national organization. So in mentor texts, we always want to be mindful of using those culturally and linguistically diverse texts. And so this is more on the education side for teachers and educators to always keep in mind the text that we're choosing to interrogate, to really investigate, to consider, and then to have students write from. And so Brilliant Bee, a wonderful story about a girl who struggles with learning and attention. Her gifts, though, her extraordinary talents is storytelling. And so in it, she describes not using current everyday technology. This book was just released in 2021. She loves her tape recorder, her old-fashioned tape recorder. So she takes that to class. Her parents got her cassette tapes. And so she records what people are saying so that she can listen to it again, because that's how then she understands more deeply everything that is being said. And she can explain to you everything that was discussed or taught that day because of her, you know, phenomenal auditory abilities and her processing.
Oh, wow.
Just such a great story. You can see she's sort of clutching the old-fashioned cassette tape player right there.
Cassette. Well,
Obviously, we have so many different types of assistive tech now, right?
Right.
The idea is very similar, whether or not you're using Otter or recording it on your phone or some other device.
Yeah, because kids today are going to look at that as, oh, she's got a phone. I know how to record.
Right.
So they, you know, tape recorder, they're not going to know that, but that's going to get their attention, right?
That's true.
Love that.
This is just a book that I frequently use when doing mentor text. And it's not about a child with dyslexia or ADHD, but it is about a child who feels they're questioning their place in the world because of their cultural background. And it's My Name. And it's excerpted from The House on Mango Street. So it's just a phenomenal book. But the mentor text piece of this is that you can use this to have students write about their own name. And maybe or maybe not, they know why they were named what they were or for whom. What's more important is how they feel about their name, right? Especially if there are a lot of culturally rich names, or rich that my names have always been, right? Whether it's my maiden name or my current name and my first name, they're just unusual names just to be able to talk about them. And she says, in English, my name means hope. In Spanish, it means too many letters. It means sadness and waiting. It's like the number 9, a muddy color. It is the Mexican records my father plays on Sunday mornings when he is shaving, songs like sobbing. I mean, it's just so beautifully written and interesting to read. At school, they say my name is funny, as if the syllables were made out of tin and hurt the roof of your mouth. But in Spanish, my name is made out of a softer something, like silver, not quite as thick as my sister's name, Magdalena. So it's just an idea of mentor text. A lot of times, especially for students who are reluctant writers, you can do mentor text, or you could just simply introduce poems and not just children and adolescent literature. So these are 2 poets who both have dyslexia. The first is Ross Athquith. And so this is just a small excerpt of his poem, and the poem's name is Dyslexia. That's
Awesome.
that's the actual poem's name.
Love that.
Words are hard. I don't mean talking. I don't mean chats. I mean, when words are walking all over the page, then they're hard. They're bats. I'm in a rage.
Oh
And
my
so-
gosh, I love that.
So much fun. And then this is Sally Gardner. So she's a prolific poet. And so just a few clips from some of her work. So it's different and written in a very different style than the first poet we looked at. But this is an excerpt from one of her poems called The Box, right? As far as I'm concerned, it's a misinterpretation of a gift of a great imagination. And we need freedom from that discrimination. But I want to ask the question, if imagination is the fuel of the nation, then why are we judged by such limitations and not allowed to do oral examinations?
Oh
Oh my gosh, I just got goosebumps.
goodness. Oh,
And almost, you could use this in slam poetry, depending upon the
Yes.
age of the student with whom you were working, or your own child.
look how that just, I mean,
Yeah,
I know, it's,
I can honestly tell you, it strikes a nerve,
Yeah.
you know, and think about that is amazing. I love that.
Mhm.
It's almost her reclaiming her own power within 10 stanzas.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, and I had to read it out, because sometimes if you just read it, when you read it out loud, you start to understand the power of some of the words.
For sure.
As far as I'm concerned, it's a misinterpretation of a gift of great imagination.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
That is awesome.
This is her Disobey Me, the name of her poem. They told me I was dyslexic. It didn't describe me. Belonged in a library of words I can't spell. No matter how many times they tell you to try harder, sound it out. Simple when you think about it. Stop giving me the 3rd degree. Don't put me down. Don't make me fret. I can't learn my alphabet. It doesn't go in any logical order. The stress gives me attention deficit disorder. A school I wanted to go it alone. They told me that's unwise. They call me unteachable. I was unreachable.
Oh my gosh.
I love her. She's great.
Love.
She's been featured, NPR and several other places. So it's easy to Google her and find some of her work.
Yeah. Definitely.
But it's also great because this really resonates with so many people, right? The power of poetry, especially when beginning writing or dissecting text, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's a window and a mirror for so many students.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Culturally, this book is absolutely beautiful, based in Cuba. And it's written in verse. So it's sort of a combination of prose and children's literature, right? Sort of combined into this beautiful story called The Wild Book. And she's struggling with dyslexia. They actually call it word blindness and some of the other, terms that we no longer use. But the others, and so here's an excerpt over on the side. The others laugh. They always laugh when I am forced to read out loud. They mock my stumbling voice. And when I have to practice my horrible handwriting, they make fun of the twisted, tilted, tormented letters. My fingers fall away from the page. I lose the courage to try.
Oh my gosh.
So great for our middle school kids, high school kids. Oh my goodness.
Mhm.
Understanding the cultural implications of this too.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
interesting because the very first author I showed you from the We Need Diverse book site, Min, she
Mhm.
actually was interviewed and they asked her about making Xavier's character dyslexic. And she said, I know that that's more unusual because in Chinese culture, in Mandarin, and because it's such a visual alphabet, if you will, you don't see as much of the struggles as you do in most other languages, right? That is letter bound or letter based, but she still thought it was important because it's still learning struggles still exist regardless of cultural differences or boundaries.
Right.
Right.
And again, it's such a beautiful way, the intersectionality, right, of so many of these pieces.
And that one just is so, I mean, I think probably every student who has dyslexia or learning disability has felt that exact way. Even if you don't, I mean, I didn't like being
Right.
called on in class, right? I would get that, oh my gosh, what if I say the wrong word? Or, you know, it's just, that's really powerful.
Yeah.
And the way she's talking about twisted, tilted,
Yeah.
tormented letters. I love
Oh, they're going to relate to
Amazing.
that.
Yeah.
This is a dyslexic legend alphabet, meaning they have chosen legendary people or
Oh.
characters or historical figures, actors, musicians, athletes, who most likely would be known. And so while it is an alphabet book, right, it could easily be adapted or just available even for older students. So Albert Einstein, Agatha Christie, Picasso, JFK, every single letter represents a different person. So every page, there's an image there embedded of the E.
Wow.
His E is for Einstein, the German. And then there's just a little blip that talks about who he is and what particular struggles he had. And some are more attention, right? Some are more writing, delayed talking, as we know Einstein did, right? Until he was 7.
Yeah.
And some of these, like in his case, it's assumed that he had dyslexia because it wasn't necessarily a label given at the time, but others who do have it, right? Steven Spielberg pops up right here. Cher is featured in the book. Muhammad Ali is featured in the book.
Oh, that's incredible.
What a smart thing to do.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah, because it just again solidifies they're not alone, you know? They're just
Mhm.
not alone. There's so many people that have the same wiring in the brain. That's all it is, the wiring in the brain.
So this is written by a mother. So she really didn't come to terms. She knew she struggled growing up. And so she's given some interviews where she talks about her own struggles, but it went completely undiagnosed. And it wasn't until she had
Mhm.
oldest son and he was diagnosed that she started to put the pieces together almost backwards of what she had struggled with. And in turn, now her son did. So knowing how she learned and where she struggled, she decided to write this book really in his honor. But the brilliant world of Tom Gates, again, sort of to take back this idea that brilliance can be found everywhere and all children have it. So the focus is on a comic book style writing, almost graphic novel a bit, but it's mostly comic strip, so that there's a lot of really incredible illustrations along with the text to go with it.
And you know what? How great is this for like coming from a parent, but for a parent to be learning about it for the first time about their child, because I can't tell you how many times I've experienced the parent saying, well, that was me, but I never heard of this when this was not even spoken about. And it's true, so it's their learning too for the first time. So this is a parent educating a parent in the family. I love that.
I know. I was just going to say the same thing. If I could I should write down every time a parent says to me, oh my, when their child is diagnosed, oh my gosh, I think I have, I think I'm dyslexic, or I think my
Yeah.
husband's dyslexic, or
Right.
they really, I mean, that's
Yeah.
really another great book. Wow, these are so great.
Yeah.
It is so, and it's an ally too for the child as well.
Yes.
In our own family, as you both know, right? My husband being able to step into his ownership of what ADHD is and how he lives with it, and then to be able to work with his son when we saw it come up.
Mm-hmm.
It's been
Right.
empowering for both of them.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
It's been great to watch the older one, my husband, who never had the label,
Yeah.
be able to advocate on behalf of his son and intervene earlier and get the help, so that some of that long-standing sense of shame, right, doesn't
Right.
Yes.
through his adulthood.
And
right?
just like you mentioned earlier, dyslexia, ADHD, executive function, when a lot of parents start to educate themselves about what is executive function, what are the skills we're talking about? I always say, you may see yourself in this resource, and you do, you see yourself where you start to say, well, that's me. Now my child has a hard time with organization. I too have a hard time with organization. So there's the mirrored image. I
Mhm.
just saw myself. Now I have a more compassionate, more of a gentle understanding why my son or my daughter has no organizational skills, so.
Right.
So again, I keep thinking of that mirror, so.
Yeah, and it's not a
It's
character
true.
flaw, right? It's just
Right, and just like with your
Right.
husband, that mirrored image, right.
This is a page from the book of The Brilliant World of Tom Gates. So as you notice, if you're familiar with the Diary of Wimpy Kids, that a lot of reluctant readers love that series.
Yes,
This is
Mhm.
very reminiscent to me of that.
yeah,
The page like, welcome back, class 5F. I've got a big surprise for you all. And then in parentheses, which is not good news. And then the student, oh no, he's arranged all the desks. I'm sitting at the front of the class. Worse, Marcus Maney Mildrew is next to me. This is a disaster. How am I going to draw my pictures and read my comics? And then over on the right-hand side is the actual picture of him drawing pictures and reading comics. And then now what happens when the teacher moved his seat to the front, which the teacher was not drawn or illustrated in glowing terms here. So
right.
with his beady eyes. A lot of people are familiar with Henry Winkler.
Yeah.
Again, having had this himself and turning
Yeah.
this into a wildly popular series. We have all of his whole catalog of books that Sarah and I use in our reading classes.
Kids love Hank Zipser.
Mhm.
He gets himself in situations and he doesn't understand why. And yes,
Great.
these are fantastic.
And it really
I
pushes
love it.
into that middle school grade level, which is
Yeah.
now sort of shifting now for some books that may be more appropriate or more interesting to older students. And that I love that it's a whole series, right? And it's written in the small chapters that are easily digestible, great
Yes.
for reading aloud or to yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of there's a font that's often used, a dyslexie font actually now that you can use and download. And a lot of books are now being produced or manufactured with this particular type of font. I'll give you an example. These are some of what they do. So the dyslexie font has heavier bottoms. Each letter has a very clear baseline. So you can see that it's exaggerated here with more color and more strength in the letters. The shapes are adjusted just subtly to lessen the chance that students are inverting letters or they're floating off the page. This helps them stay grounded. And then the clear designations, the subtlety of the design, and then longer sticks. So oftentimes you can see this is more traditional font in red, and this is the dyslexia font in blue. And so it's becoming more and more popular. This is a book written in dyslexie font. So if you see authors or publishers talking about what that is. Kimden Nebel is the author of this book, Sam is Stuck. He was struggling to find high interest, low level, right? Which in the teaching world, we want them to be topics that are relevant to the age, developmental age, and the interest of a student, but written at a level that is decodable. So not necessarily level text, but predictable, decodable text.
Mhm.
And so she started writing books for her own 7-year-old son and founded what's called Simple Word Books, SWB.
Love
And so
that.
they have between 4,000 and 8,000 words. And her mission is to allow them to read and reread the stories, which builds fluency. And it also helps children identify words and start to store them. So right back here is where words get stored in a word form area. And all of her books are written in that new dyslexia or dyslexie font, which is what it's called. Barrington Stokes, it's a UK-based publishing company, but they specialize in books that are accessible for students who have all types of learning differences, particularly dyslexia. So in their design, right, dyslexia-friendly font, accessible layouts, they use a lot of unique spacing, and then they use off-white heavier paper with the idea that black letters on a stark white background is a very difficult way for many individuals to read text. So an off-white text, a cream colored text, you'll often even see colored text or colored overlays be put on top. And not because dyslexia has anything to do with the visual, like we used to think it was an acuity issue with what the eyes are seeing, but it actually just makes it easier to process the words. And then the stories are written short books and chapters. They claim it's to build confidence and stamina, which is pretty interesting. This idea of sort of, you want children to get pretty excited and they feel like they've accomplished 2 chapters because it's, 2 and 3 pages each. And then their books are beautiful, right? They use award-winning authors, really nice illustrators. So it doesn't look like it's not well done. They've done this for a long time. This is an example of one of their illustrations from one of their books. And then on their, I just pulled 2 of their books. They have a whole collection. If you just go to Barrington Stokes and the website, you can browse through all of the books and all of the different interest levels. The Great Food Bank Heist, it's a hilarious book.
You can tell by the front cover.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Looks
it's about
cute.
a group of students who are trying to figure out who keeps breaking into the food bank and stealing all of the food. So it's actually, students get really into it, right? Because it's like not a murder mystery, just a mystery of a whodunit, and then the students are working together to solve it. And then Grandpa Bert and the Ghost Snatchers. I mean, they're just texts that immediately spark a student's interest.
Mhm.
And then the nice thing about it is when you're on the Barrington Stokes page, most of their books, you can go in and click and the first chapters are there and they will read them. You can have them read to you. And so again, it's a way to pique the interest of students to say, hey, do you want to look at these books, right?
Mhm.
To get
Right.
a feel for what they are and whether or not you might enjoy them. And you can see they're written in chapter book format.
Yeah.
So they look like a text that a 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th grader would read. Just another resource I wanted to share. And then a few books for teens.
Mhm.
Fish in a Tree, very, very well-known text
Mhm.
written about a young woman. She's a teenager named Allie who's really struggling. And with the help of a teacher, right, starts to see her untapped creativity and helps her sort of walk through what the diagnosis of dyslexia means. Diary of a Dyslexia School Kid.
Oh my gosh.
So you're gonna, I mean, if you like the other one, right? And we're back to sort of that graphic novel feel, but it's co-authored with a teenage boy with dyslexia. And the whole thing is cartoon-based illustrations. This is a quote from Amazon, an honest look at the difficulties of being dyslexic, but with a simple and relatable approach. So it's a lot of fun. So it's actually written in diary format day by day. So again, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, reimagined, if you will.
That's smart. Yeah.
I love what it says there. I just how stupid the spelling of Wednesday is.
I mean, what's that D for? If you said it out loud, it would be Wednesday.
That is great.
And I had French today at school. Like it just gets better and better because then he, dissects French because learning a foreign language.
Right. Oh, I hope
Right.
this is great.
Right.
Dyslexia is my superpower. For this particular book, they interviewed 100 children, young adults on what it meant to them to have dyslexia, but what they learned from it or what tips and tactics they had, right, for getting through it.
Oh,
In the book,
Nice.
all the illustrations in the book are designed and made by some of the children they interviewed and others who have dyslexia.
Wow.
So it's really an incredible book. It's not fiction based at all. It's much more of an interview style, but with 100 different interviews sort of distilled into what some of those lessons are. So
Mhm.
this particular excerpt is "Dyslexia is my superpower," is what she wrote. She's 10 from Tennessee.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And dyslexia, a brain disorder. So for teens, this is also good for parents. And it includes in it, Sally Davis does a nice job because she includes a lot of those, if you don't have the ABC book, but she talks about some of the famous characters, again, historical figures, politicians, musicians, actors, authors who had or have dyslexia currently, right? And how they've either been able to use it to their advantage or they're in careers where some of their strengths are really highlighted or some of the supports they receive through school. So, and it starts to delve into some of that brain-based research, but does it in a more accessible way, right? Especially for teenagers and young adults.
Right. This would have been a great book. I had a senior at one time, and she ended up doing her final project on dyslexia, and this would have been such a great resource for her. Oh, wow.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just my parting quote as we end the workshop tonight. Jacqueline Woodson, I love her as a children's author. Since we started with children, we'll end with a children's book. But the day you begin, there will be times when you walk into a room and no one there is quite like you until the day you begin to share your stories.
Oh, wow.
You begin to understand, right, the commonalities that we have as people, even if we have different labels and backgrounds, some of the emotional undercurrents are the same. And so this book does a beautiful job talking about this. A girl new to school who comes from a very different background than most of her peers.
That is beautiful.
Thank you so much. This has been great.
Keely, this is fantastic. I mean,
Really is.
you opened up a whole new world for me. I mean, so many books are out there, I mean, I think even, Sarah, you could probably agree with me. I think from a practitioner point of view, we're always, we're looking at the instruction, which is super key, right? Of course, how to be diagnostic and prescriptive in our instruction. And then finding those controlled readings that are short, simple, to the point. But this has opened up, like, I look at the same passages all the time.
Right.
This year.
Right. And so many of the other books are so low interest,
Yeah.
And these are just so rich. I mean,
They are.
Yeah,
This
I
is
want to
just-
order all of them and then
I know, right?
I am. I actually just texted our head
Yeah.
of school and said
Yeah,
I want to
her
order all
Amazon
of these
cart
and then
is
go
filled.
into all the classrooms and do read alouds for all the kids.
Oh, wow.
Right.
That's my new plan.
But you know what, even making these not only in the classroom and at home, and what you just said, and but it's educating teachers that might not have the knowledge about it, and educating parents as well. Yeah, Keely, you've put a lot of research into this.
Yeah.
You really. I'm sure you'll write your own one day. I'm sure you'll, that would be so cool. I know, just to write about it. And
books are so powerful. I've always
Yeah.
loved
Yes.
books, but to me, this is just such a great way, right? To widen widen a child's perspective, make them feel less alone, right? Empower them.
Right,
special way.
right.
Yeah.
And I love the windows and mirrors. You turned me on to that too, in teaching our undergrads and having them do this windows and mirrors project. And it's so powerful. But I think now we're starting to bring in those books that aren't just culturally windows and mirrors, right? That are learning differences and
Gender differences and
you know,
related-
the autism spectrum disorder books
Yeah.
about those kiddos. I just love that idea of really wanting to understand, what is happening with our other kids.
Right.
And,
I'm glad you said
and this idea of like mentor text. I mean, I know that the kindergarten teacher at the campus lab school uses mentor sentences, and the children have such rich, she'll pull a sentence from one of the books that they're reading and do the same thing that you would do with a text if you were in graduate school, but she does it with a sentence. And
Right.
how is this framed, and what is the imagery, or what is the prepositional phrase? And you can do it. You could strictly align with more grammatical principles, but she takes it
Yeah.
even further. I mean, it's just, there's so many things you could do to really, once you read and reread and then sort of extrapolate from.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then with the writing process too, actually, I see one of my students on here and we were talking about that today, using those mentor texts to help every reader, but it really helps struggling readers to have that, to hold on to, whether it's a repetitive phrase or, whatever it is, whatever you choose to use that text for. It's such an important piece to teaching.
So true.
Fantastic. Well, Keely, thank you so much for
Thank
joining us.
you.
I think we're going to be able to continue. I think Lou Kaladik has mentioned, we've talked a lot about poets. And so, I think he has a connection, and maybe we could feature some authors of books, and maybe we can bring that back, starting the new year. But I know that we'll return in February, right, Sarah?
Right.
On the second part for mathematics for those that learn differently with math. So I think that's going to be in February. And so we'll have a schedule also on our website. So look for that. And we look forward to seeing everybody in 2023.
That's right.
Right. Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you, Keely.
Keely, thank you.
So much. It was great.
Thanks. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.